You're listening to the ISF podcast for your organization's better cybersecurity. Your host, ISF CEO Steve Durbin, is an expert in leadership, business culture transformation, and cyber strategies for today's top enterprises. I'm producer Tavia Gilbert. Today, Steve and I discuss the impact that artificial intelligence is having on society, and we'll certainly discuss other things as well, as always. Steve, good to have you here. It's been a minute.
Yes, hasn't it? Yeah, it's been a little while.
Nice to be back with you. I want to start our conversation today bringing up a point that I heard you make recently, and it really stood out to me. You said technology is an enabler. In terms of AI, what can technology enable when it comes to how we humans go about our day-to-day lives? Obviously, we're talking about this mostly in the context of work, but let's not limit the conversation to that. What other areas do you anticipate that AI is going to change or facilitate or otherwise impact?
Well, it's interesting that you should choose to start with that, Tavia, because what I was trying to, and I do remember saying that, I also remember why I made the point. And I'm not sure in the context of what we were talking about at that time that people fully understood where I was going with it. But I had two concerns. The reason I was talking about technology being an enabler was principally because I do have a concern that as a race, we've become over-dependent upon technology to the point where we are becoming over-reliant on it. And so I was trying to make the point that it is nothing but an enabler. So it is useful. I'm not some kind of Luddite, but we need to always bear in mind that to get the best from any form of tool, there has to be the tool and the user. And I do have a concern that we're moving perhaps a little too far into being overly dependent upon technology. So that was one of the things I was saying or trying to say at that time. The other thing about it, and it's to the point you make about artificial intelligence and the way in which technology continues to advance, is that it is enabling a whole new range of shifts in society, in learning, in accessibility. And so again, I wouldn't want people to think that everything that is coming about through AI and technology is bad. It isn't. If you look at the way in which it has opened up opportunities for people perhaps who have disabilities of some form, the way that it has enabled medical advances, the way that it has allowed us to really experiment in a whole range of different manufacturing areas, technology areas, all of that is being brought about through significant advances in technology. But again, and you've heard me say this many times before, I do think that we need to be putting in place guardrails, particularly when it comes to AI, around how it's going to be used, because we're playing with a technology, the power of which we don't fully understand yet.
Right.
Because it continues to evolve at such a rapid pace. And if we look forward just a few short years, we're going to have quantum computing coming down the road. And that combination of quantum with AI probably scares me a little.
Yeah.
We don't do something positive to gain control. And so we're back to my comment around technology as an enabler. If we come at it from the perspective that that is what it is there to do, it is a tool, but we as people have to be in control of that tool. Regulators have to be putting guardrails in place to make sure that we do retain some form of control over it and we are able to make use of it for good as opposed to anything else. And I think that the future looks pretty bright. If, on the other hand, we don't, if we adopt an approach that we lumbered into with the internet, for instance, then I think the outlook is pretty grim.
We're an interconnected global marketplace and global ecosystem. Is it reasonable to think that one nation or one area of the globe can have those guardrails and that wise oversight, and another part of the world can have very little or no oversight or no guardrails, and we can function successfully as a planet?
Well, I think that therein lies one of the challenges. And if you'd spoken to me about this, or if we were doing this, I don't know, maybe 12 months ago, I would have been a lot more optimistic, because at that point I did see some signs of some kind anyway of cohesion when it came to regulation. But I think that particularly with AI, what we've seen is different parts of the world going in different directions. So if you look at the European Union, for instance, they have the AI Act, which operates in one way. If you look at the United Kingdom, that operates in an entirely different way when it comes to AI. If you look at the United States, it's entirely different again. And then we move into China, which has a different approach to it. So we've got complete fragmentation that's just in that area of AI. Is that going to come back together? I don't think it is. At one point, again, I may have been persuaded, particularly when I was talking to the people who are developing the EU AI Act, I may have been persuaded at that point that it was going to be the AI version of GDPR.
Right.
People were going to look at it and sort of, coalesce around it, use it as a baseline, if nothing else. I don't think that's the case. And I think that the reason that it isn't the case is there is money to be made in AI.
Right.
And so we've now got this political, financial, almost trade war type situation emerging in technology, where countries are trying to encourage investment. They're trying to encourage, obviously, more jobs to come to their countries. And this is one of the tools that can be used. So I don't see a future, in the near term anyway, where we will have some consistency around the world. And that makes life exceptionally difficult from a business standpoint. Mm-hmm. Because obviously, if you're a multinational organization, you need to be aware of the different laws in the different jurisdictions in which you operate. And the point you made earlier is a very valid one. And that is that we used to have a global, relatively free market. How is that going to evolve? And what are going to be the implications on business? And one of the things that I can pretty much guarantee is that it will make life more difficult in the short term. So, longer term, we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah. Setting aside that very open-ended question, when you reflect on the rapid acceleration of AI and other emerging technologies, do you see them as having overall more potential to deepen our humanity or to distance us from our humanity? I know that's a big question, but I want a very specific, grounded, black and white answer. I'm kidding.
Yeah. I think that my answer is that it isn't very specific and very grounded. It depends. The reason I say it depends is that I do think we're at a little bit of a junction. I think we're going to go what some people would say would be the wrong way. So let me try and sort of unpack that a little bit and explain what I'm talking about. I think, and this goes back to how we started with technology and is it an enabler, is it not? We are becoming, I would say, over-dependent upon technology, irrespective of whether we're talking about artificial intelligence, quantum computing, whatever it might be. And that is raising issues around how we as people, as society, operate. It doesn't really matter where you go, whichever part of the world you happen to pick. You will struggle to find somebody who isn't using a piece of technology, even if they're having a conversation within a group. And so if your world is centered onto your little screen, because let's face it, it normally is a phone that people are looking at, how do you possibly have any time to consider what is going on outside of that little box?
Right.
Humanity, for me, is all about experience. It's all about feeling. It's all about relationship. And you can't have that with a technological tool, I would suggest. And you can't have that without investing time in understanding other people, the way in which the world operates at the human level, not the technology level.
Right.
So if your view on the world, if your view on society is formed through this little box that you have set up to provide you with information that continues to support the views that you already hold, how can you possibly step outside of that? And so it's something of a philosophical issue, I suppose, but I do think that the only way to make that break is probably through our education system. It's probably through not the removal of technology. You can't do that. That genie's long out of the bottle.
Right.
We can't turn the clock back. It's impossible. What we can do, though, is learn how to work with it better and to say that there is a space for technology, and this applies really with AI as well, where there has been a massive, in my view, overdependence and level of excitement in this bright, shiny new toy. Mm-hmm. And stepping back and saying, you can use the technology, but at the same time, there is a much more fundamental element of life that is around people, and people get things done. Technology will never get things done. Technology will break. I can guarantee you that. And when it breaks, the only thing that will get it back up and running is people. And so we have to continue to invest in people. We have to continue to invest in our teams. not to the exclusion of technology, but we shouldn't be using technology to the exclusion of people. So it's how do we create this marriage that, like all marriages, will have its ups and downs between people and technology so that we get the best from both. And that, I think, is where I go back to the whole education system, how we can introduce it at an early stage so that people can understand the role that it has to play, the role that it doesn't have to play, and we can separate out what is good about the technology and what is good about the people. And then perhaps we can have the two things joined together and maybe we stand something of a chance.
I like that. I really like you saying we cannot use technology at the exclusion of people. And that seems a fundamental wrestling match over whose viewpoint is going to prevail. Those who believe we can exclude humans because we have technology, and those who believe that is a recipe for maybe disaster or just not rising to a level of excellence, at least.
I'm sure some people would disagree with me here, but for me, the beauty of people is that they are unreliable, unpredictable, and creative. Technology, we want to make predictable, reliable, and I don't think it can be creative.
I agree with you.
I really don't. I mean, people would disagree with us there. We know that. And so I think that if you fall back on a society that is made around predictability and reliability, yes, okay, there may be some advantages in that in certain discrete areas. But what about advancement? What about fun? What about creativity in terms of how people just get on with each other, find solutions? I don't see that as being the remit purely of technology. So I do very firmly believe that the future has to be about how we bring those two things together.
I agree, and I'll make 2 quick points. That any creativity that comes from technology has been scraped from human society for decades. So it is not creativity that the technology has come up with. It's creativity that it has been fed. And human beings operate on an energetic level. There is an energy that is exchanged. So that is not something I think that can be artificially created. So you and I are on the same page.
Yeah, you're right. You can't artificially create it. And I think that when you try to, it falls flat in its face.
Yeah.
And we should be calling those things out. You know, when it doesn't really inspire, when it does fall flat, those are the instances that we should be calling out, not assuming that, oh, okay, well, mediocrity is the way that we need to go because the technology told us. And, I always remember, it sort of ages me a little bit, but I always remember when sat-navs first came out into cars, and you always used to read about people who would blindly follow the sat-nav into a river or a canal because the sat-nav, and you think, for goodness sake, you can see that the road ends and the canal begins. What were you thinking? That's just a very simple example of how an over-reliance on something like a new technology can somehow prevent us as people from exercising common sense.
Right.
Why would you do it?
Right.
Did you think it wasn't really a canal because the technology told you it wasn't there? I mean, it's a nonsense. And that's what I mean by this over-reliance. And that concerns me greatly, particularly when we look at all of the things that we do with it, particularly in the security space. You cannot be over-reliant on the technology. You have to trust and verify.
Well, you just said the word that I was going to use, that we still have to trust ourselves. We cannot hand over trust entirely to a digital, inhuman device and stop trusting our own intuition. And I understand that this is a slippery slope because we also have to look wisely and clear-eyed at data. If it is just a matter of trusting our own eyes and ears, we still need to be able to trust our human abilities, our senses, to make sense of the world. I
wouldn't disagree with that at all. And I think it is about how we get the balance right. And I think that it isn't about shutting down some of the technological advances that we're seeing. It is about just being a little bit more realistic about their fallibility and trying to get equilibrium back between people and tools.
And this also has a big impact on how much we trust each other. So I think we've had many discussions over the years about the erosion of trust, the compromising of trust. What does an over-reliance on technology do to our interdependent human societies and our relationships?
This takes us right into the sort of security space, doesn't it? Because we're concerned about things like identity. How do we know that the person we're talking to online really is the person we think we're talking to?
Right.
We've seen, the proliferation of very sophisticated deepfakes being created by AI. We've seen an uptick in capability of criminal gangs making use of sophisticated technology. And we're never going to get away from the fact that data is immensely important, and we create it, almost at will, and we use it. And so we have to put in place, yes, technology sense checks, but also it's back to my example of the guy driving into a canal, because his sat nav told him to. We also need to be healthily skeptical about what we see in our technology, social media in particular. We talk a lot at the ISF, as you know, about trying to raise security awareness so that people are just thinking before they might click or before they might undertake an action that the technology is asking them to, because somebody is allegedly claiming to be, me or you or
Right.
whoever it might be, and so therefore they're trusted. So it introduces a new level of sophistication in terms of the whole trust paradigm. Because in the olden days, of course, you and I could sort of bump into each other and I would know that it was you because I would just know that it was you, because I knew the way that you looked, I knew the way that you walked, what you wore, what you might say, your mannerisms, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
All of those disappear online.
Right.
AI is pretty good at mimicry. And so, again, we have to be very much more aware, cautious, I think, about how we might go about acting on certain requests using technology in the absence of some of those much more human means of verification. And we will introduce them ourselves. We will get better at it online. We are doing it already as we're getting used to it. But again, you've got to look at the whole span of society. And clearly, at different ends of the age spectrum, people may be more or less able to differentiate between a deep fake and reality. And so I think, again, it comes back to how do we take a much more broader brush approach to supporting society to use technology in a safer, more trustworthy way.
Right. We've seen societies over historical periods shift one way, shift back the other way. Do you think that when it comes to technology, there is a revolt ahead? You mentioned something about the overexcitement of the shiny object, right? And I think we are very much in this place of just being in awe of AI technology.
Mm-hmm.
Is there going to be a reckoning, a pendulum swing the other way, do you think? Or are we so embedded that it is going to be impossible to do that?
I think it's all about evolution. We're in the midst of another industrial revolution that is being fueled by technology and artificial intelligence, which is going to transform the way in which we behave. It's going to transform the overall industrial landscape, irrespective of where you happen to be in the world. And I don't think that within our lifetime, we will turn that back. I don't think that we will suddenly see people saying, do you know what, going off grid, that's the way for everybody to go now. You will still have some people who do that, of course, and that's absolutely fine. And, good luck. But the vast majority of people will not. And so we will have to find ways of coming to terms with things like addiction, in terms of technology addiction. We will have to find ways of coming to terms with things like trust that we've just been talking about. And we will have to find ways of better using technology rather than, I think, being subservient to it. And that's my concern, because we have to regain control as users. We have to regain control over what's going on. I mentioned quantum earlier on. I think that when quantum computing does arrive, it will be yet another game changer in that whole sort of industrial revolution that we're going through at the moment. And on the one hand, I find that very exciting. On the other, it's pretty scary, because I don't think we fully understand yet where we're at with what we've currently got. I used the example earlier of the internet. It's completely the Wild West. And yet we assume when we go onto the internet that it's some sort of safe space. It isn't. It is far from it.
Right.
And I think that a lot of the advances that we're seeing just need to have some form of regulatory control. And it's very strange for me to say that, because for years, I've spoken against compliance, spoken against regulation as being something that prevents us from being entrepreneurial. But I think this is probably one of those instances where we do have the need for some kind of guardrail, some kind of guideline. But I don't see, sadly, any one organization or entity or country being able to gain or pull together some form of consistency in that space. And so I think we're still in that sort of very immature stage when it comes to this. And we will continue to get excited by different things that happen. You could think back to ChatGPT. When ChatGPT came out, everybody suddenly thought that AI had just arrived, and then businesses adopted it. And it's only now that we're discovering that actually it isn't quite as easy to make use of it. It isn't quite as cheap to make use of it. And perhaps it doesn't have all of the answers because we need to develop it further. But it's made a massive difference. And so I think we will have some of those pivotal moments that continue to emerge over the coming years.
My experimentation with ChatGPT has left me profoundly disappointed, and if it were a contractor or an employee, it would have been out on its ear. So far, I'm unimpressed.
You make a very, very good point. And it comes back to my whole premise, which is technology is a tool.
Yeah.
So who is at fault on ChatGPT, as in your example? Is it ChatGPT or is it you? As the user, not being able to get the best from the tool. The tool, which is in its infancy, which hasn't evolved to the stage that you perceive it needing to be. So therefore, from the user standpoint, is there not an argument that says you would need to do more in order to get something better from ChatGPT?
Maybe.
I mean, I use it in a slightly different way. I use it to stimulate thought. So I will be provocative with it and get it to throw some things out that I may think is some of it's useful, some of it isn't. But I use it like as a sounding board rather than anything else. I don't see it as being, I can suddenly get rid of a speechwriter and have it all produced by ChatGPT. No, don't see any of that at all. It'll get to that point, but I think it is about, the user has a key role to play.
Yes.
It's not plug something in and whoop-de-doo, we're going to get the whole answer to the meaning of life. No, not going to happen.
Right. I want to be respectful of your time. We've been in a really interesting philosophical discussion. I have two final questions. And you may have already answered this question, so you might be brief, but 50 years from now, 100 years from now, how are people going to judge how we've handled emerging technologies? What are they going to write about? I think you used the word immature. That gives me a touch of where you might take your answer.
I would like to think that within that time frame, people will look back and they'll go, you know what? We thought at a certain point that they were really going to stuff it up, but they managed to pull it back from the brink and they managed to get control. I suspect that what they will do is take a look back and go, why on earth did they do that?
Yeah.
Why on earth didn't somebody see that there was a better way? Because that's with the benefit of hindsight, isn't it?
Right.
And we've all got 20/20 vision when it comes to hindsight. And so I think that we're in the here and now, and we need to find a way of muddling through. And I think that everybody has a responsibility to do that, from the individual who happens to be listening to this podcast. Hopefully more than one individual listening to the podcast.
I'd say 10 to 12 at least.
Right the way up to, organizations, governments, society in general.
Thank you for a philosophical, interesting, expansive conversation. I feel like with the combination of AI and quantum and fallible human beings, we have subject matter for years to come. So we will have a lot to discuss in the future. But thanks for spending time in this discussion. I hope it's meaningful to our listeners as well.
Yeah, I hope so too. And I hope it's thought-provoking. I mean, I think that's what we set out to try to do with this one, wasn't it?
Yes. Thank you. Really nice to see you, and we'll be back next time.
Indeed, we will.
We'll be back with another new episode next week. In the meantime, if you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast, and we'd be pleased if you'd consider sharing the episode. To become an ISF member, get in touch with Steve directly at steve.durbin@securityforum.org or on LinkedIn. Check out all our media and resources. All of it is there to support you at securityforum.org. The ISF podcast is produced by Talkbox Productions and Tavia Gilbert. Thanks for listening.